Sarvebhyo namaskaraha, Yellorukkum vanakkam, Ellarigu namaskara. And today I would like to present to you all a short synthesis from an astrological objective on the future of Bharata. What could happen to this beloved country of ours? We all have questions. We're all born here. We, I'm sure, have a very strong wish to know about the future of this country and to work towards the fulfillment of the destiny of this great civilization and nation. Most of us have this intense desire within ourselves. At some point of time or the other, we might suppress it for some reason. Some of us might want to go abroad. We've been in that position, have been in that same position. We might suppress this wish of making this country amazing, but we all have it within ourselves from the very time we walk through society. We all want to build this nation as it was in its golden ages. And its golden ages are so markedly clear. We all know it's been documented by several travelers to this country. They are very, very beautiful periods of time we experienced. There was no dearth of food. There was no dearth of cultural artifacts. There was no dearth of civilizational prosperity. There was no dearth of. There was basically no dearth of educational opportunities in this country. People from all over the world came to study at our universities. Just imagine, just the way we flock to European or American universities. People from the world of that time used to flock to Nalanda and Takshashila. And that was the glory of Bharata. And not just that, we had one of the most formidable empires, and at the same time, we did not engage in a genocide to fuel the power of our empires. We engaged purely in diplomacy, artha, and dharma combined to foster the growth of our empires. There were very few wars in the Indian subcontinent during that time, and they were largely fought based on dharma yuddha, the principles of dharma yuddha. Never once did our scriptures allow or even give any authority to any leader who used genocide as a method to control other populations. We did not wage such campaigns. We only fought with the belligerents, never with men, women, and children who are innocent. This is something that is deeply rooted in our culture, ahimsa. And every single emperor of ours was guided by the right kind of people, was always guided by a rishi. And that was the glory of Bharata. We have to bring that back, and that's our duty. And there are different strata of society which believe in different things, but it is our duty to rebuild Bharata as it was in the past. This has been spoken many times by different people in history as to why Bharata needs to be built. Yet, every single time in the last 70 to 80 years, we try to progress and then something comes up, some obstacle comes up, or within the country there is some sort of opposition which does not allow us to progress either from our own people or from outside our country, and it keeps on failing. Or there are invasions, like there were several opportunities in ancient India wherein people wanted to re-establish Bharata towards its golden age, but then an invasion occurred or something else happened. So over a period of time, there has been a section of society, a large section, which has gotten disillusioned, who has lost hope to an extent as to when the country will grow. There have been, pained poetry that's been written by several of our poets as to the problematic state of affairs that we went through. And of course, we had Islamic invasions, following which we had colonial, imperialism that affected this country, after which we had decades of kleptocratic governance, corruption that plagued this nation. And over a period of time, when people keep echoing these nationalistic sentiments, some of the youth of this country start to feel this is pure jingoism and it will never be established. But here I'd like to re-establish that hope with a few humble opinions of my own, as well as a few astrological reasons as to why I believe this country would progress and why we are back in that same era that we had experienced in the late 4th to the 6th century AD, as well as the 3rd to the 5th century before Christ time frame. So we're going to see why exactly this is going to happen through a series of historical narratives, as well as I'd also love to share with you certain insights that I have recently researched on through Jyotisha. So before we begin, I'd like to share certain things. There are many questions, so we'll start with these questions, and in case I do not answer all of these, you could ask me these questions again towards the end of the session. I'll try my best to answer them based on what I have in mind today. Where are we heading as a civilization? That's the first question. Bharata is a civilization, and it is very, very clear. We have our own ethos, we have our own culture, we have our own dignity, and we are a sovereign nation at last, at least. So we need to know where we are heading as a civilization. The second question, why are we here in the first place? Why are we in this particular scenario wherein the country has been plagued by, as I just explained, and as we all know through history, so many decades and centuries of subjugation and difficulties. We have to know why this has happened so far. Is this how we are always supposed to be? There are many individuals and groups, obviously racist groups, who in the past as well as today, tell us that we would never succeed, either because of our color or because of our beliefs or because of our traditions. But we must understand that we have succeeded in the past. We have, in fact, as Sri Kanaka Sabhapati ji mentioned in the inaugural speech the other day, we have represented over 30% of the global GDP at different points of time in history. Not just different points of time, a continuous period of about 1,500 years or 2,000 years. We were almost the only part of the world that was rather significant for the global economy, apart from China. So we will be able to come back to that position. There are ways to do that, and a lot of work is being done at the moment as well. And our youth is putting amazing effort, and we are seeing the progress. But we need a direction. We also need some hope to keep us going during these difficult times. So I'd like to just share some of my opinions here. Of course, the other question is, what is going to happen to our country in the future? Not just the civilization, we also need to know about the political integrity of this nation. What's going to happen to the political status of this nation? Will we continue the way we are? Will we expand? Will we re-establish what we had in the past? And what will be the condition of the entire subcontinent? And of course, we have another very important question. How are we going to do all of this? How are we going to achieve the golden age of Bharata? What do our ancient sages tell us about nation building? Our ancient sages, be it Valmiki, be it Chanakya, who was an amazing and astute politician as well, every one of these great people have given us a blueprint for building a nation, a civilization, which is agreed upon even today by several authors and economists on this subject, and socio-political commentators as well. It is a known fact that to build a nation, you need strong institutions, and we'll come back to that. And in my humble opinion, there is a waxing and waning in terms of the quality of institutions over a period of time. This is something that you might have even observed in history and socioeconomics. All I'll be doing is connecting this to astrological cycles to assign it some sort of periodicity. However, you would have observed this just reading in history. You might have seen these cycles. If some of you here are interested in history, you might have seen how there's a waxing and waning in terms of prosperity, in terms of the quality of institutions, in terms of everything that is necessary to build a country. So, of course, these are the primary questions we'll be seeking to address today, all of which are super important for the progress of this great civilization. So, to understand the future, we must first analyze the past. Some people think that the past is something to be thrown away and to be left behind, and some people believe that there is no significance in understanding the past. However, history often teaches us through very harsh manners that those who forget the past will end up eventually experiencing the negative results of their actions or the actions of their forefathers or anyone else in the past. We need to study the past effectively and properly. Otherwise, we will be plagued by the same disasters that we were in the past. The conditions today are very different, but we must understand the past. And most of us here know how our past was for the last 1,000 years and how it was in the 1,000 years preceding that. So, the theory I'll be using here is a couple of astrological patterns. I understand this might be a rather new subject or even a controversial subject for some of you. So I will be explaining a few things from my point of view, and you're free to ask any questions, no bar at all, any even skeptical questions about astrology. I indeed welcome that. So over the period of this conversation, you could take notes. If you find some point revolting, you can always let me know about it, and I'd love to give you or even try to give you an answer. And in fact, to be very honest, I've been looking forward to this conversation with you all today because I've always wanted to speak with people who have studied and who are fresh in their studies of history, sociology, economics, and politics, so that even I can gain a diverse perspective. I might be having a particular perspective, but I'd love to listen to yours as well. So, we'll be combining astrological patterns and historical data to analyze what would be of this country and even the world. So, in order to understand this better, we must not have a narrow view of just India and the Indian subcontinent or just Bharata. We need to have a view of the entire world. And since the world is globalized and lots of things that have happened in the past as well, let's look at the entire world, and I'll be walking you through certain periods in global history. So, I'll come back to this later. It's a theory of cyclicity and collective karma that's very important in Jyotisha. We attempt to answer the same questions that everyone asks. An economist would also have a question as to why a certain civilization rises or falls, because the rising and falling of civilizations are very marked. There's a very clear year or a time frame which you can point out to when you say the Roman Empire fell, or the Byzantine Empire fell or rose. There's a very clear time frame which you can point out to if you want to say the Abbasid Caliphate or the Umayyad Caliphate rose. There's a very specific time you can assign to the Golden Age of India. Hence, we all want to know why, when, where, and how. So, of course, astrology approaches this through the Vedantic philosophy of karma, and there is another application of this in the Puranas known as the collective karma. When a group or society elects a leader, and a leader or a government engages in negative activity or negative karma, it invariably affects the entire nation, the society, or the ground, the land where such activities have been done. So it's very important to understand the concept of collective karma, because you might have heard astrologers or even others telling you that, your chart shows some sort of negative karma you have done in the past. So similarly, we could apply the same principle to whole tracts of land, cultures, civilizations which have committed atrocities and are bound to experience the results of those in some point of time in the future. So the next theory, which of course is something debatable, and I'd love to of course debate on this if anyone has a few questions here, the theory of the influence of grahas. It is an astrological theory that believes that the grahas have some sort of influence on the earth. When we say grahas, it is a complete different definition compared to planets. Planets are not equal to grahas. Planets, the word planet comes from a completely different root word in, I guess, Latin or Greek. And the word graha comes from Sanskrit, which means to influence. So anything that is capable of influence is known as a graha, basically. So anything, it could be the sun, it could be the moon, it could be even stars, it could be even an individual can also be a graha. So that's an important point to note. Secondly, we'll be looking at certain important cycles, astrological cycles. Astrological cycles are based on astronomical studies. So there are different types of cycles, of course. There are 60-year cycles, there are 20-year cycles between Jupiter and Saturn. As we know, Jupiter takes about 11.86 years to complete a synodic revolution, and Saturn takes about 29.47 most likely. And the time when they both happen to come together from a relative standpoint of the Earth is about 20 years. So every 20 years we have a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, which is known as the Great Conjunction. And it is these patterns which inspired early age astronomers to study astronomy deeply, because they had a deep interest in astrology. So astrology had an important effect in promulgating astronomy as well. And of course, 60-year cycles are combinations of 20-year cycles. When you have 3 successive Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions, you end up having a triple conjunction kind of situation, which is a 60-year cycle. There are 220-year cycles wherein 10 consecutive great conjunctions take place. And a very important thing to note is that each of these great conjunctions has a specific effect on humanity. That is what I'm going to just share with you all today. There is a specific effect that takes place. And when 10 of these happen, humanity itself moves forward in a very massive leap. Something very special happens. And I will be showing you all today what that will be. Then there are, of course, 480, 560, and even 960-year cycles that have been observed to affect the Earth. And we're talking about 25,000 year plus history here, something that's absolutely fascinating. So I first came across this concept in 2019. I was 14 years old at that time, and I was just studying the Panchanga in my hand, and I just noticed that there's a specific combination that's coming about in early 2020 that's going to completely change the world. So what I did then was I, studied it deeply, went through historical patterns, searched when such a combination happened in the past. To my surprise, every time this combination took place, there was something very special that completely altered the trajectory of humanity. It could be a pandemic, it could be a war, it could be a geopolitical or a socio-political revolution. Something was completely revolutionary about it. So I said, okay, something's going to happen in 2020 that's going to completely transform the world. So I took my camera and made a video on the around the 20th of August 2019 about an upcoming major change in the world. Either it could be a world war or a massive pandemic. That was my prediction. And I mentioned that it would be specifically starting somewhere around November 2019 and would reach its peak between March and April. Today, by Bhagwan Shri Krishna's grace, that video is the most viewed astrological video for predictions about the world. And a lot of people have commented on it. It is something that many people have debated on as well, and you all could also take a look at that. It's titled Severe Danger to the World Between November 2019 and April 2020. So that was my firm conviction. And in 2020, what we saw was there was a massive change in the world. We saw a pandemic, the economy crashed temporarily, the world changed completely. Most of you would agree that we could call 2020 the start of a new era. The time frame before 2020 can be called the pre-2020 era or the pre-COVID era. Completely everything has changed. The rise of technologies that we thought would take another 20 years took place earlier. The rise of socio-political changes that we thought would take another 50 years took place earlier. The kind of rapid change in the economic systems that took place just in that 1 year took place earlier. And there was new hope for many so-called third world countries as well because of this 2020 change. So a lot of things happened in 2020, and that was, and if there is a question as to why 2020 is so special, Jupiter and Saturn came so close to each other in 2020, it was a topic of global discussion. If someone here is interested in astronomy, you might have of course come across several articles, lectures, and even astronomical discussions on the Great Conjunction of 2020 purely for astronomical purposes. So Jupiter and Saturn were so close to each other that you'd have to have a telescope to see them apart clearly. That's how close they were during that time frame. And we haven't seen such a close conjunction since 1623, and I'll come to that next. That was the significance of 2020. And if you think this is just a one-off occurrence and I got lucky by predicting it, let's just go to a few other historical occurrences. The history of Bharata as well as the world. I'll be focusing on Bharata today because if we go into the history of the world, we'll be multiplying the number of events we'll have to discuss by 100-fold. So let's start with 712, one of the most significant events. We had the first Islamic invasion of Bharata, which was successful, unfortunately, by Muhammad bin Qasim. He invaded Sindh and destroyed the culture and heritage in Sindh. He fought the indigenous people of Sindh and destroyed several thousands of people. A very, very unfortunate event, followed by another great conjunction, 1026 AD, when Muhammad Ghazni again came over from all the way from the Turkic lands to destroy the Somnath temple. He attempted this 16 times or 17 times, and he was successful at the last time, and our forces were overwhelmed, and he ultimately desecrated the idol of Somnath within the temple, massacred 50,000 plus Hindus in a single day, and chronicled the same. His own scholars chronicled the exact scale of destruction that he did to our Vedic society at that point of time. And of course, he also desecrated the deity by slaughtering a cow right there. This was one of the biggest events in medieval Bharata, 1026 AD. And again, I'll explain why exactly such a thing should have happened, why exactly it happened in the first place. Several people have this, and we all have this within ourselves, a generational and a civilizational trauma of whatever has happened in the past. And that is why we must, of course, stand together and make sure that such a thing never happens again by any force in the world. But of course, before we digress from here, these were two very significant great conjunctions. Of course, to those of you who are interested in astronomy and astrology, you could go further deeper into these specific time frames, the dates when they happen, and the specific combinations, and you'll be furthermore fascinated, I must say. Of course, another very important great conjunction was 1206. 1206, if most of you history buffs here might be interested in, 1206 was the time when Genghis Khan his rise commenced. He was elected by his people in 1226, and he began a tirade across the world. That was another great conjunction, 1226. It was so close that you literally see Jupiter and Saturn extremely close, closer than 2020 as well. And what happened? Genghis Khan completely transformed the world. He massacred entire cities and changed about 60% of the existing world at that time. He conquered several important so-called caliphates and empires through the course of his invasions, and decimated Baghdad, which was one of the central capitals of the world economy at that time. And all this happened exactly starting 1206. Isn't it fascinating? And if you go into history, you'd see that this was an year when Jupiter and Saturn were super close to one another. And of course, he reshaped the world entirely. In his time as well as in our time, it's considered one of the most barbaric situations for the world. But there are also counter opinions that state that it had some positive effects on the ecology of the world. He delayed the Industrial Revolution by several hundred years, and he also changed the way we look at economy and everything else. So there are different connotations to it. So every great conjunction has both a positive and a negative side. Nothing is entirely negative. That's the nature of Prakriti. There is something good that happens, there is something bad that happens. Depends on the lens that you use to view history, by the way. So 1603 to 1623, there are two conjunctions here, one in 1603 and one in 1623, and they're very close ones. Again, I'm only bringing about the most important great conjunctions here. Great conjunctions happen every 20 years. We are going through most likely 1,000-year history in today's session. So I'm not, of course, going into each of these conjunctions. I'm just going into a few so that you get an idea. So this was basically 1603 and 1623. And in 1603, we had the invention of the stock market. What a monumental event, which is still impacting the world in both positive and negative ways. It has spurred an era of venture capitalism and of the transformation of industry. It could be considered the start of the first industrial revolution through the colonial empires that several different European countries seek to establish. And that also signaled the fall of several Islamic empires and the rise of European colonialism. And everything happened right within this time frame. We also had them starting to, significantly strengthen their stronghold over Bharata as well. Another very important great conjunction is in 1921. Late 1921, we had a very important great conjunction that resulted in the rise of what we call today as communism, because of a lot of frustrations that people in certain parts of the country had, partly even some delusions that they had about the world. They brought together this new form of thinking. It's not exactly new if you look at ancient world history, but yes, they did organize it into something new. It completely changed the way we look at politics. For example, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, basically began exactly around 1921, and the first communist state in the world, in a very proper manner, was established in 1922. Just imagine how huge and how powerful this event was for the world. We, in fact, are still experiencing the effects of communism around the world because of this one event. It could be termed the single most powerful event in the last 100 years. Of course, that's debatable until we see the next slide. World War II. Again, this happened exactly around the Great Conjunction. If you see, World War II started somewhere around 1939, mid-1939. However, the worst year of World War II in terms of human casualties and rather, just sickening scale of brutality was in 1941, and that was exactly when we had another great conjunction. There was also one in 1940. In fact, in this particular time frame, there are three great conjunctions that occurred one after the other. Jupiter-Saturn once, then twice, and the third time. Operation Barbarossa occurred in 1941 when Nazi Germany decided to invade Russia, one of the most cataclysmic events that have been observed in history. And this happened, of course, we had the genocide of the Jews, loss of countless lives during this time frame, and countries were just pawns in this period under the hands of colonial empires. They just used a country to go ahead and attack another country, and things were really, really horrific. The world expected that this would be the last war, but unfortunately, if you look at history, that's rarely even possible. So yeah, this was the World War II. And that brings us back to 2020 now. We are seeing one of the most transformational events. But before we go ahead, World War II again has its own positive as well as negative implications. This might be a very controversial statement, but I'd still like to emphasize purely from a neutral standpoint that World War II also had certain economic ramifications on the world. It resulted in the rapid decline of European colonialism. All the major colonial powers who waged World War II rapidly lost territories, and most of the wealth flowed to the United States, a different geography in the world. Again, how we map the flow of Lakshmi or prosperity from one geography to another is another theory which I will promulgate very soon. So 2020 has been one of the most important great conjunctions, and as we have illustrated, the great conjunctions do seem to have some impact. And it would be rather childish to completely disregard anything related to the grahas and their influence on the earth. Of course, there might be many rational questions that should be posed here, but it's very important not to be completely closed to ideas that we are not completely aware of yet. In fact, several thousand years back, many people weren't aware of the technologies that we are so well versed with today. Similarly, we might not be aware of the specific energies that these grahas are exerting on us today. So we might get aware of some of these energies, some of these new forms of physics, maybe another 1,000 years down the line, maybe another 200 years. That does not mean we completely disregard the essential theories behind this. At least we should give it a look and try to study it. There's no harm in reading history, of course. So 2020 was the closest one. So what are we going to expect in the era post-2020? There's a very interesting theory that's come about. These are 800-year cycles between each time frame approximately. And each particular period is a smaller super cycle of 200 years approximately, which includes 10 great conjunctions each. So each great conjunction is 20 years multiplied by 10, which is about 200 to 220 years. And within the first time frame, 14 AD to 809 AD, we had the rise of Christianity. If I'm not wrong, I might have forgotten, but Jesus Christ was born somewhere around 33 years before the Christ era. And 14 AD is when he actually established a large part of what we know today as Christianity. Some of the very major events took place. We could call it, the Star of Bethlehem, as they say, took place 7 years before Christ. And 1480 was one of the most significant years for the transformation of what we call today as Christianity. After which, until 809 AD, we had a rapid rise in Christianity. Large empires converted to it. And in 809 AD, it shifted to Islam. It came to the Middle East. So if you look at the trajectory, the entire change occurred in the Middle East next. And there was a rise in Arabian powers, of course, accompanied by several horrible genocides. And that continued until 1603 AD, when the European powers started to rise. So there is a cycle which you can see, and if you go before 1480, you will see something similar as well. So what we are seeing now is 2020 AD is very similar to the Vayu Tattva trigon of 392 to 590 AD, wherein Jupiter, Saturn, both were in conjunction repeatedly in the same trigon. So if some of you here have studied astronomy, you might have heard about the Kepler's trigon, wherein, it's basically a simple theory. Jupiter and Saturn keep getting conjunct. So oftentimes, because of the laws of motion, basically, they end up in the same location of the zodiac, which is basically the ecliptic belt with reference to the Earth. And this takes place once in a while. So to put it very simply, 2020 is going to be very similar to 392 to 590 AD for several reasons, astrological reasons. And we are going to see a resurgence during this time frame, not only of Bharata, but also the rest of the world, which is known as the Third World. Of course, Africa might not be able to, be at par with some of the other Third World economies. However, it will also rise in a magnificent manner over the next 200 years. Year-on-year growth would be amazing in that continent. Bharata would experience some amazing growth. The quality of our institutions is going to rapidly transform during this time frame. There's going to be a lot of really amazing things that are going to happen in this period. Of course, as with every great conjunction that we have seen, there are going to be some really negative events, some things that we would term horrific, but there are also going to be some really amazing events that are going to take place during this trigon. And this is going to last for 220 years. And it's also the sub-cycle of a 400-year cycle. So you're going to see some really amazing things that are going to happen, which is why people often question, why is 2020 so different? I think most of you would have this question as well. What is it that made the time frame of 2020 and the years thereon to be so amazing, basically, so transformational, negative and positive? It never ceases to amaze me, at least. So each great conjunction is transformative. It results in technological progress. It results in a change in human thought, the new philosophies that come about. You have a dramatic rise of new world orders that take place, the birth of great spiritual leaders, or sometimes spiritual, demons in the guise of spiritual leaders. You'd have scientific advancement that takes place right within these time frames. And also, sometimes you'd have a decline or dramatic collapse of old world orders, which are sometimes saddening. For example, the fall of Constantinople, which is today known as Istanbul, when the Turkish forces invaded Constantinople and destroyed everything that stood for the Greek civilization at that time and converted it into an Islamic city that is today known as Istanbul. So such things also do take place. You have dictators, you have tyrants and violent power struggles that take place within great conjunctions. The French Revolution or the Reign of Terror are good examples. The birth of violent tyrants and warlords also take place within great conjunctions sometimes. And the Sanskrit verse, which Varahamihira, the most celebrated ancient astronomer by far, apart from Aryabhatta and Brahmagupta, has clearly mentioned Sammoho Koshau Bhayadau Prajanam. In his research, and based on the ancient scriptures, he has mentioned that the Sammoha and Kosha conjunctions, when Kosha refers to a great conjunction, can cause extreme fear in humanity. It can cause widespread changes in the systems of thought as well. And it also causes fear particularly, which is why 2020 gripped us with so much fear. If there was one emotion we can assign to 2020, it was fear. And it of course resulted in great opportunities, but it was primarily fear. So this is an age of between 1623 and 2583. We are in an age of rapid technological progress, rapid scientific advancements. There's going to be a remapping of human thought, which we've already seen, some amazing things that have happened in the world. The good news is that this transformation is not limited to the West. We are most inclined to look at the West for everything. Unfortunately, today I'm also speaking a Western language. However, this transformation of thought and the economy is not limited to the European countries. It's going to come east, and we are already seeing signs of that. We're seeing several East Asian countries experiencing amazing resurgence, and we too should see that in a matter of 2 decades from now on. That is one of the most significant points I'd like to lay down today. And this will happen very, very soon. But we have to be prepared for it, and we have to work towards it. While Jyotisha is a tool to explain to us the importance of the future, it also tells us, it helps us prepare for it as well. And that is the main point of some of the talks that I deliver. And especially since today we're speaking to a very youthful audience, I think this would have a more stronger impact. So there are going to be many changes. Borders will be redrawn across the world, not just in our country, in several parts of the world. You have laws which will change rapidly, and it'll be fast, of course. And so, how do we make the most of this transformative period? That's the most important question. And secondly, what will be of our beloved country? My opinion is that we will progress so strongly that we might have not seen such a rate of progress in the last 400 years. That's going to be the scale of progress that we will see. And our youth is prepared to handle this, and I can see that every day. When I arrived in IIT Mandi the other day, I was so happy to see that there is a resurgence in unity, there is a resurgence in cultural thinking, there is a resurgence in the spirit of ambition, which was there in ancient India, to build something right here, instead of escaping to different parts of the world and build for other countries and other civilizations that are incompatible with ours. So it's very important for us to build here and renovate our culture. And that's going to happen for sure, in my humble opinion. But there will also be both internal and external strife. No progress happens without opposition. And whenever it happens, so it's very rare, and I haven't seen such a case wherein progress happens without any opposition. There will be opposition, it's a natural part of humanity. So there will be internal and external strife. But every time we are beset by such calamity, our youth, our people, and our way of thinking will help us surmount these challenges. This is not the previous trigonal era. We are in a new era, and we shall not allow any power from across the world to decimate our progress this time. We shall rise above whatever we were in the past, and we shall show the world what we are capable of. We shall transform our economy, our education systems, and our institutions, which are most important. So, of course, from the ancient Bharatiya scriptures, including some of them such as the great Ramayana, there are certain very important rules that we have. For example, Lord Rama asks Bharata when he comes to him, Grihitashtaiva prishtascha kale drishtas sakaranaha kachinna muchyate choraha dhanalobad narashabha. It's very important for us to transform our institutions. The first question that Lord Rama asks Bharata is, how are you taking care of the justice system? Are you sure that there is no corruption in the justice system? Are you sure that everyone is being treated fairly? Are you sure that cases are being taken care of very well? And this verse clearly illustrates that Kachinna muchyate chora dhanalobha narashabha. He asks specifically that I hope there is not a situation in which some criminal is let out of jails or penal authorities by paying a bribe. It's very important to note that Lord Rama in his times itself had clearly warned against the practice of corruption and had clearly established rules that such a thing should never exist. And those times were excellent that way. Chanakya has laid down amazing rules as to how to battle corruption, and it's a surprise that they're even still valid today. And of course, the main things that we should take away from our scriptures are investing in the country's youth, the youth of Bharata, very important. And our scriptures have emphasized this time and time again. Even from the Bhagavatam and elsewhere, it's very important. Kaumara Acharet Prajna, both spiritual values as well as values of faith in yourself as well as your society have to be instilled from a very young age. Transforming the academia as well as the education industry, that's very, very important. Every country or every civilization that has risen to prominence in the modern era has invested quality time in making sure that their academia as well as their education industry is robust and free from external negative influence. And of course, transforming the institutions. If you look at some of the research that's been done, a very prominent research, I think they've won the Nobel Prize for it, but I forgot the exact names of these two great scholars. They mentioned that unless you transform institutions in a country, you cannot build it. Nation building has to first begin with changing the judiciary, making sure that it's strong, it's effective, that it is impartial, that it gives justice to everyone concerned. And that's very, very important. Promoting cultural values. Many people today believe that cultural values are a thing of the past and it's not necessary to strengthen them. But unfortunately, this is incorrect, and it is sad to see that a large part of the youth is currently influenced by these ideologies which tell them that their culture is something of the past to be discarded. It is not so, in my humble opinion, as well as the opinion of several scholars. Culture is the bedrock of civilization. You need a goal to target before you reach that. You need it. You need a particular lakshya, as we say in Sanskrit, a goal. You have to target it, and that goal must be linked to your ethos, your cultural ethos. And there's nothing to be not proud of our civilization. There's so many amazing things that have happened in this Punya Bhumi. Just because it is currently in its decadent state, does not mean that it shall never rise again. It means that it will rise again, and it is our duty to ensure that. So, it's very important to engage in transformation of this country, and there's no better person in this country than the youth of this great nation. And of course, transforming education and hard work. That's super important in this time frame. We all must contribute to the progress of Bharata in our own ways. We all can do it in different ways. And of course, we are in a free market. We must build a meritocratic, free market economy that is centered on Dharma. Dharma here does not mean religion. Dharma means righteousness, doing what is right. And something that's linked to our culture, the Sanatana Samskriti, we can definitely progress. The knowledge of our glorious past and our real history is very important to be taught in every single school. And instead of, when I was studying in a school, I was studying in a government school in Karnataka, in Mysore. And that was around 2013 or 14. And I was appalled to see that the textbooks of that time in Karnataka were praising the Mughal invaders for their invasions and praising the Europeans for bringing about their destruction in this country. Of course, because of the, wealth that they looted from this nation as well as other colonies of the world, they were able to do some amazing things technologically, but the opportunities that our people had were looted. The opportunities that the rural people of this country had were looted. People were put to famine and everything else, and yet they were being glorified. And in some cases, the British were being demonized in these textbooks, but in most cases, the Mughal invaders were being glorified. The genocides that they did, that are documented in history, that are literally mentioned by these rulers themselves, were completely hidden from purview. Let me give an example. 1398, Timur came from the Turkic lands and decimated 100,000 Hindus in Delhi in a single day. And he wrote this in his own autobiography. Can you imagine the scale of inhumane thought that this individual had? And surprise, he was celebrated by the Islamic scholars of his time. He was not demonized by them. Just imagine if a Hindu king or government today creates a sort of genocide at that scale and writes in his biography that I murdered 100,000 people of a different religion. Would we Hindus appreciate it? No way. We would completely overthrow such a government and never allow such a thing to happen in the first place. It is appalling to see that a country such as ours, 70 years after independence at that time, was writing textbooks which completely hid these historical truths from purview. And it's very important that we transform our educational system as well to reflect the true history of Bharata, so that our youth know not to repeat such mistakes ever again. we need unity. And for unity, we have to study our languages. It's not too hard to study a language, especially for brilliant people such as yourselves. There is Sanskritam, there is Tamil, which are one of two most oldest languages of this great land. It's very important to study these two, as well as the regional languages of different places in Bharata. Sanskritam and Tamil are super important, especially because they unify the country. Both of these languages were spread across the length and breadth of the country, and I need not elaborate further on this because most of you already know from linguistic history. So it's very important to study these two languages. If Sanskrit is not possible, at least study your regional language, but I would definitely recommend studying these two. Living a principled life is very important. I quoted some Sanskrit shlokas, so I'd like to also quote a beautiful text which I hold very dear to my heart, as well as countless Bharatiyas hold it very dear to their heart. It's known as the Thirukkural, and I definitely recommend that everyone reads the Thirukkural. It is the ethos of Bharatiya civilization. It begins with the ideals of ahimsa, satyam, akrodha, tyagaha, shanti, apaishanam, daya, bhuteshwaro luptvam, mardavam, hrihi, achapalam. These qualities that have been ingrained in the Bhagavad Gita have been very beautifully put in the Thirukkural as well. The Thirukkural says, Arattinung akkamum illai, adanai marattil ungillai kedu. It says that there is no greater gain than virtue, nor any greater ruin than its neglect. It is a principle that we must all abide by. And of course, it also says, Sirappainum, Selvamum inum, Arattinung akkam yavano irku. Which means, what gain greater than virtue can a living man obtain, which yields both fame and wealth? Virtue is not only for the purpose of spiritual gain. It is primarily for the purpose of spiritual gain, but it also has material benefits, as they say. Vidya vinaya sampanne. It's very important to cultivate virtue in this country, and we must not just go ahead in the in a spree of moral decadence. That's very, very important. And of course, the upliftment of the poor. This is super important. And several of our great leaders in the past, including Swami Vivekananda, have clearly mentioned that the upliftment of the poor and the strengthening of the youth is central to Bharata's future progress. And he had predicted that this country will progress. He was a great Mahapurusha, and he had deep knowledge from an intuitive standpoint, and he truly and firmly believed in the golden age of this country. So did Sri Aurobindo Mahodaya, who also predicted that this great civilization shall rise again. So for that, we have to uplift the poor, and who better to do this than the great and intelligent youth of this country. Cleanliness. This is super, super important. Our Shastras say Shaucham is the most important quality. Without Shaucham, there can be nothing else. And Shaucham does include physical cleanliness as well. It's not just mental cleanliness. And only if you have a clean and beautiful atmosphere around you can you progress properly. The kind of dumpsters we have created in this country, even decades after independence, are appalling. They are really, really horrible to look at. Every single major city that you go through, there is at least one, not just one, there are hundreds of occurrences where you see a complete lack of civic sense, a complete breakdown of cleanliness. Of course, there's been a lot of progress in the last decade, but there's a lot more that has to be done, because as our scriptures say, only if there is cleanliness will Lakshmi Mata come to your place. And it's very important for us to establish Shaucham. And of course, the youth have a great role to play here. We can, in fact, go to different cities, clean it up with our own hands, establish strong social movements to ensure that this is happening. Otherwise, this country cannot progress. You have to clean up the dirt on the streets, as well as the dirt inside the brains of the corrupt politicians, as well as the people who are ruled under them and who vote them to power. And of course, these are some things, and I'd like to end this lecture with a beautiful trio of verses from the great Bhagavad Gita. Om Shri Bhagavanuvacha Abhayam Sattvasam Shuddhi Jnana Yoga Vyavasthitihi Danam Damascha Yajnascha Swadhyayastapa Arjavam Ahimsa Satyam Akrodha Tyaga Shantirapaishunam Daya Bhuteshwalo Lupvam Mardavam Hrirachapalam Tejaha Kshama Dhritishaucham Adroho Natimanita Bhavanti Sampadam Deivim Abhijatasya Bharata. So Bhagavan here says there are some important qualities. Of course, each of these can be deliberated on for quite a long time, but I'd like to just give a basic synaptic overview of it. So basic synopsis of each. So Abhayam, which means fearlessness, a true Bharatiya, true Bhakta, should have no fear when he's fighting for the right cause. When I say right cause, it is based on Dharma, based on the principles of morality, which are coming up very much next. Sattva Samshuddhi, the development of Sattva, which is the internal strength, the internal psyche, something that cannot be defined in English terms. It's just Sattva. It's known as the strength of the psyche. And Jnana Yoga Vyavasthitihi, basically. Jnana Yoga Vyavasthitihi, which means being poised in knowledge, always learning new things and going deeper into knowledge, including mainly spiritual knowledge as well, which keeps us grounded and gives us a vision and discipline. So, Dhanam, the act of charity. Charity is very helpful for an economy as well. Of course, it has its own spiritual benefits, but let me just give a basic overview of how charity is really good for the economy too. The more you give, the more you want to rebuild again. So people, there's a very famous study that says that people who tend to give more tend to increase their capability of earning as well. It's very good for the economy when the upstanding people of the country start giving more towards right causes and ensure that it reaches the right place. That's what the Gita says. It says that you shouldn't go and dump your money or your efforts in the wrong areas. You should only put it in such a way that it actually benefits the cause that you are working towards. And of course, Damaha means self-control. Humanity has come this forward through evolution only because of self-control, only because of self-restraint. The capacity to restrain oneself from something for a greater good. That's very important, and the Bhagavad Gita emphasizes that. Yajna, sacrifice. Yajna here does not just mean the Agnihotras and Yajnas, they are also very important, but Yajna here means being able to sacrifice something for greater good. And of course, Swadhyaya, studying regularly, both spiritual as well as the other knowledge systems that we are supposed to learn in order to benefit our society. Swadhyaya, Tapaha, which is penance. Everyone must have the habit of penance. Some simple ways every day in the morning. I'm also struggling to wake up early in the morning every single day, but I'm trying to make it a habit at my end. And this is one small form of tapaha. Helping out animals, for example. Bhuteshu aloluptvam ahimsa. Daya bhuteshu and ahimsa are two very important qualities. That is, being non-violent as much as possible. I'll just give a basic small fact, not to take too much of your time, but Bharatiya civilization is the only civilization that has caused the least human deaths due to political reasons in the world. Bharatiya civilization, including Hindu civilization, you can just see throughout history, we have caused the least genocidal deaths in the world. You can study this. None of the other civilizations have come even close to the level of ahimsa that is being practiced here in this nation. And that's because of our scriptures, our shastras, our moral stronghold. We cannot imagine killing people just for political gain. And that's something that we strongly believe in. And if someone does that, we are completely against it. Daya bhuteshvaloluptvam mardavam mriduta. Softness as well as fearlessness are both qualities of a good person. We must be soft towards the weak and fearless when confronting the evil strong. And bhavanti sampadam devim tejaha, which means effulgence. When you do all of this together, when you practice these qualities, you build something called tejaha, and that is visible when you speak, when you interact with people. There is this tejas in your person which another person can perceive, and they will be able to emulate what you speak about. That is what you can gain by following these practices. Harihi is a very important quality. It says shame. Shame is a very important quality for every good person, for every Daivi person. And Lord Shri Krishna says there are only two types of people in the world, two types of people. One is the Daivi individuals and the Rakshasi individuals. So Daivi individuals have shame as well. Before committing something wrong, there's an intense shame that stops them from doing it. And that is also very important. When we talk about civic sense being one of the most important issues of this country, Hrihi is very, very important. And these are adroha, not cheating anyone. That's also a very important quality. Not only is this a spiritual quality, this also helps in strengthening your economy. You're able to build trust between people, between countries. And this country can progress far better if the amount of droha reduces. That's only possible when the institutions transform and the people work towards such transformation. So these are some qualities, and I definitely behoove you all to read them again from the Gita, and also please read the Thirukkural. Let's work toward a resurgent, powerful, strong, morally grounded Bharata. So Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Ramachandra, Jai Shri Lakshmi.